All right, so we're now at section 3 in chapter 2. Remember, the first section looked at the idea of the self, and then the second section looked at the idea of presenting the self and what you choose to present or not. And now we're going to look at the idea of disclosing the self. Let me minimize this and stay here. Okay. As we go through this section, yes, there's a lot of theory, and that's important, but I want you to think for yourself, not just in general terms, but also for yourself, how you can identify what an optimal level of self-disclosure would be in a relationship that's important to you, and what an optimal level of non-disclosure would be. All right, so let's first figure out what exactly is self-disclosure. All right, so it has to be information about you, so it has to be personal, that you purposefully communicated to someone else. It cannot be something that someone overheard. It can't be something that's not really about you. So we're gonna look at the 4 distinguishing factors of self-disclosure. All right, it has got to be true. If you're saying something that's not true, that's not self-disclosure. It's lying. Okay, but to be honest doesn't mean you have to say everything. Okay, I like the word. It has to be revelatory. So it has to be information about you that cannot be found other places. I would say can't be found easily, because I know there are some people who can do a real deep dive into the internet to find out a lot of information about others, but not everyone can do that. So it's got to be something that people would say, wow, did not know this about you. Okay, like if I were to say to the class, guys, I have to tell you that I dye my hair, I don't think anyone would be surprised. If I said to the class, well, I dye my hair because I'm actually, if I didn't dye it, I'm completely gray, which is not true, by the way, that would be revelatory. Although, honestly, I don't think you guys would care. But that's not information that you would necessarily know otherwise. Again, it has to be, I kind of combine these two. It has to be information that is not readily available. And it's in the last one is it's in the context of sharing. The context in which you share. Okay, what makes information shared self-disclosure as opposed to not self-disclosure can be the context in which you share it. Sometimes I can't even get my thoughts together right now. Okay, as the textbook says, information about family life may seem more personal when a student shares it with the class. I don't really know why. So then I've got 2 sentences here that there is a difference. If you were to say to someone, I don't like clams, that could be self-disclosure. But there's a big difference between that. So you're sharing information about yourself. I'm communicating it purposefully to you. Okay? But there's a difference there between that and I don't like you. And I think it's really, for me, that is probably the difference is at the revelatory stage. That this is information that is really deeply personal. But each of us has an idea. I go over to your house and you say, Marguerite, I've made this great, family and I, we went out clamming and I've prepared this wonderful clam meal for you. And I say, oh dear, I don't like clams. That might be a big self-disclosure. Okay, so we're going to look at 2 models of self-disclosure. I think it's interesting just for general purposes. It might be interesting for you to look at this in terms of a relationship you have with someone else. Okay, we're going to look at the first one called the social penetration model. It's also sometimes referred to as the Altman and Taylor model that looks at degrees of self-disclosure. And I hate this because I have difficulty saying this word. It's looking at the breadth of information shared, how broad, and the depth of information. And basically what happens is you're looking at all relationships start on the outside and then move in towards the center. And it probably would help if I actually showed this diagram. Okay, so this is you and a coworker. Okay, and so the breadth is the purple, the, I don't know, mustard, orange, fuchsia, you know, the 2 shades of blue and the other yellow. Okay, the number of different topics you talk about. And then the depth is how deeply you go into this topic. Okay, so the blue and the bright pink, notice how they're not very deep. It's likely that what you're sharing would be more in the realm of a cliche. Is, you know, someone says, hey, how's your family going on? You go, oh, my family's a nightmare. It's kind of a cliche because you're not going into a lot of details. You're not going into depth on that. Other things that you might share would be something along in the more in the realm of facts. My opinion about our mutual friends. You know, I really like hanging out with Jody, but when she starts talking about her ex-boyfriend, I just stop listening. Okay, that's a fact. Okay, something that might be another kind of self-disclosure are opinions. That frequently is a little bit deeper because facts people can't dispute with you. I don't like clams. Okay, when you get into opinions and you say, I think that, I should have picked something different. When it's cruel to dig up clams when they're just very comfortably lying in their beds, and we dig them up and then we brutally kill them. All right, so there's your opinion. So that goes a little bit deeper. And then the last one is expression of feelings. When you'd say, I'm hurt, I'm suspicious, I'm ecstatic, I'm whatever the feelings are, that is probably the deepest that you would go. So if you think about a relationship you have with someone, and then think about the breadth, I hate that word, of the topics that you talk about, or that you communicate about, because it could be via text. And then when you think about these topics, what are some that you're more superficial about, and what are ones where you go into some depth? If you do this and nothing gets deeper than my opinions about our mutual friends, you might say, I'm not self-disclosing an awful lot in this relationship, or I don't think this person is self-disclosing a lot to me, which is not a bad thing, but it can make you think maybe we don't have as solid a relationship as I thought. This one I like a lot better. The Johari window model was developed by Joseph, that's where the Joe from Johari comes from, Joseph Luft and Harry Ingram. Some people call it Johari, but I like Johari. It's just like when people say Target instead of Target. Okay, so do this for yourself. Okay, you can think of yourself as these quadrants. Everything that you know about yourself is in the left-hand column. Everything that you don't know about yourself is in the right-hand column, which obviously you don't know it about yourself. That's kind of blank at this point. The top row is things that other people know about you, and the one on the bottom row is things that other people don't know. So if you know things about yourself and you share them with others, that is your open quadrant. What do I share with people? I share that my husband takes his shoes off everywhere and it drives me nuts. Okay. Hidden. Well, of course, as soon as I tell you this, it won't be hidden, so I'll have to make something up. Something that I know, but I don't share with other people. when I was in kindergarten, I loved to eat the paste that the teacher would give us. I'm sure it was not toxic at all. Okay. All right. So obviously now that I've shared this with people, it's moved from 3 to 1. The blind one is things that it's very obvious to other people, but I don't know it about myself. But probably, it's been at least 10 years now, but somebody said to me, "You interrupt me all the time." I had been totally unaware that that was something that I did. Okay. Now, of course, as soon as I knew about that, it moved from blind to open, and then I worked on not doing it, at least not quite as much. The last quadrant, things that you don't know and other people don't know, because you haven't been in a situation, you don't know how you're going to react in a crisis, maybe. It could be, maybe there's medical, things going on in your body that you don't know about. You don't know if you're susceptible to COVID or not. Okay. So the interesting thing with this, I would find, is if you take this and you do one of yourself. Now, this is shown where all of the quadrants are the same size. And you think about it, people who are extremely private. So that quadrant number 3 would be very big, which would mean quadrant number 1 would be very small. If you are someone who is extremely self-aware, then quadrant number 1 is going to move over into quadrant number 2 quite a bit. So let's say you do one of these for yourself, and then you take it and you flip it over. And we'll go over this in class just a little bit. So there's someone else that you have a relationship with, and you're going to draw these 2 windows side by side, but you're going to have the other person's number 1 and number 3 facing your number 1 and number 3. And you realize, like, I had a friend, really liked Lynn, but I would feel uncomfortable with her. And at one point I realized that there was stuff that she shared, stuff that was in her quadrant 1, that I thought should probably be in 3. And so that didn't match up for us. I was a much more private person, and I'm sure she was thinking, why will Marguerite never share with me? And I was thinking, oh my God, would she just shut up? I don't want to know this stuff about her. So that's one way that you can think about self-disclosure, and if you're uncomfortable in a relationship. So this is, as I have said, this is one of my favorites. Okay. Why would we self-disclose? Let's look at some of the benefits of self-disclosure. Well, the first one is catharsis. You just get it off your chest. I haven't known how to tell you this, but I really don't like it when your brother comes over and cuts his toenails in the living room. I feel really good. I mean, that would be disgusting. I think I would not keep that hidden. I would be self-disclosing right away. Okay. Another one is self-clarification. Sometimes we don't really know how we feel or think until we say it out loud. So you're just clarifying things for yourself. This is why people go to therapy or counseling, right? You're saying things, and sometimes until you've said it, you didn't even realize that you felt it. Right? Some of it could be self-validation, where you want the other person to really say, yes, you're so right. So you would say something like, what do people sometimes preface it with? Maybe I'm terrible, but, and then they say something like, I just don't like Aunt Mary Ellen's pecan pie. And the other person goes, I know what you mean, it's awful. They've just validated you. Reciprocity is a big one. We self-disclose because we want someone to self-disclose to us. That's how we build a relationship. I hope I didn't tell you guys this story yet. I tell it in all the classes because I think it's funny. My daughter was in kindergarten, and she had one of her first friends over, and the girls were sitting at the kitchen table and they were coloring, and they're sharing, and so, Isa says, I really like chocolate chip cookies, and her friend says, oh, I do too. So you'll hear there's some reciprocity. Or I like to play I like to watch We Sing Train. And Kelly says, I don't like that. Okay, so then my daughter says, my dad likes to pinch my mom's butt. And I'm waiting. Okay, this is how I can find out a little bit about her parents. And Kelly says nothing. So in that case, reciprocity failed. Okay. The fifth one is impression formation. We reveal personal information to make ourselves seem more attractive. This is really interesting. A couple on their first date, one or more partners may share personal information to appear more sincere, interesting, sensitive, or curious about the other. And that tends to work. Okay? Especially if the person listens to this and then shares or discloses back to you, you're forming a good impression of each other. Obviously, I mean, this next one makes sense. Relationship maintenance and enhancement. If you have been friends with someone for a while, or you've been in a romantic relationship with someone, or at work, you have to let the person know how you feel about certain things. Because if you don't, if you keep things bottled up, your relationship will either stagnate or it will deteriorate. And we will talk about this in I think it's chapter 10 is when we'll talk about that. Okay. So the last one is moral obligations. The classic one is if you have a sexually transmitted disease and you're going to have a relationship with someone, you need to let them know. You have a moral obligation to let them know. I mean, currently with COVID, if you are exposed to, if you have a positive COVID test, you have to let the college know. You have it's a moral obligation, but I think I'm pretty sure it's also legal right now. And it's just so we can make sure that we're doing what we need to do to keep everybody safe. Okay. Isn't that wonderful? All of these 7 reasons why self-disclosure is good for us. It's healthy for us. But not everything is not always wonderful. There are risks. The biggest risk, well, I guess for me, is you self-disclose and you are rejected. I remember saying to someone that I was, you say to someone, oh, you know what, I love you. And they say, oh, you're such a good friend. Ugh, crap. Okay. That's a risk of self-disclosure. You can it can be a negative impression on the person. So you say to your boss, I'd like to have next weekend off. And your boss says, oh, I don't make these decisions. I got to go talk to the big boss. And you're thinking, well, what good are you? You know, that kind of, I thought you had power here. That can be a negative impression. It unfortunately can lead to a decrease in relational satisfaction. You know, let's see, your mom, always makes, she decides that she thinks, for some reason, maybe because you've lied to her, that you really like her corn chowder. So when you come over, she makes it, and you really don't like it. And so you say, you know what, Mom, I'm so glad that you're thinking about what I like and you make the corn chowder, but I really have lost my liking for it. It's probably going to be a little bit of a decrease in relational satisfaction there. You know, the example I gave for a negative impression that would also fit for loss of influence. If you self-disclose to someone that I don't have as much authority as you thought, well, okay. That could also be loss of control. Like if I have you all convinced that I am the person who determines your final grade, and then afterwards I tell you, it's actually the dean who tells me I have to have everyone has to get a passing grade. That's not true, by the way. I've just lost a lot of control because you're like, why do we have to listen to you? You're not the person in control. We are actually in control. And I think for most people, the main reason they don't want to self-disclose is they're afraid of hurting the other person. All right, there is more to this section in the book, but I don't want this one video to go on for too long, so I'm going to take a break, and then I will wrap up the chapter.